$100 trillion, 14 zeros printed on a single piece of paper. Hold this note in your hand and you are on paper 100 trillionaire. Yet it can't buy you a loaf of bread. It can't even buy you a bus ticket across town. Somewhere, a country reached a point where literally everyone was a billionaire and almost everyone was starving. This is the story of how a nation printed itself into oblivion and how the ashes of that collapse are still shaping its economy today. Rewind to 1980, Zimbabwe had just won its independence and it inherited something most young African nations didn't have: a booming, diversified economy, fertile land, a modern commercial farming sector, and export earnings from tobacco and maize so strong that the country earned a nickname across the continent: the breadbasket of Africa. It fed its neighbors. Its currency was worth more than the US dollar. For a moment, it looked like a genuine African success story, but that success was built on a fault line that was about to crack wide open. At the center of that fault line was land. Most of Zimbabwe's most productive commercial farmland was still owned by a small number of white farmers, a legacy of colonial rule that fueled decades of political anger. In the year 2000, President Robert Mugabe launched a sweeping land reform program, seizing thousands of commercial farms, often violently, and redistributing them, in many cases, to political allies with little to no farming experience. The intention was to correct historical injustice. The execution gutted the economy. Within just a few years, agricultural production collapsed by more than half. Export earnings evaporated. Foreign currency reserves dried up. And a government that was already spending heavily, including funding a costly military intervention in the Democratic Republic of Congo, now had a massive hole in its budget. There was only one lever left to pull, and pulling it would break the currency completely. Facing empty coffers, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe did what struggling governments have done throughout history. It printed money to cover its debts. At first, it seemed manageable. $100 here, a few million there, just to plug budget gaps. Printing money without producing more goods doesn't create wealth. It just chases the same loaf of bread with more and more cash. Prices started climbing. So the bank printed more to keep up. Prices climbed faster. By 2008, Zimbabwe wasn't just experiencing inflation, it was in a full hyperinflationary spiral, one of the worst ever recorded in human history. Economists estimate that at its peak, prices were doubling roughly every 24 hours. Imagine going to sleep and waking up to find your money is worth half of what it was worth yesterday. Now imagine that happening every single day for months. The central bank kept adding zeros just to keep the currency usable at all, until in January 2009, it issued the note that would become the symbol of the entire collapse: a $100 trillion bill. And still, it wasn't enough. On the ground, the numbers on a chart became a matter of daily survival. Zimbabweans were photographed pushing wheelbarrows full of banknotes, not to a bank, but to the grocery store, just to buy basic food for the week. Prices in shops changed multiple times within the same day. Shopkeepers stopped bothering to print new tags. Some simply raised prices while customers were still standing in line. Cash became so devalued and so abundant that counting it note by note was no longer practical. Bundling and weighing it was faster than counting it. At its absolute peak in November 2008, independent economists estimated Zimbabwe's monthly inflation rate at roughly 79.6 billion%. To put that in perspective, at that rate, prices weren't just rising daily, they were rising by the hour. A lifetime of savings could be wiped out in the time it took to walk to the bank. Pensions that once supported entire families became worth less than the paper they were printed on. Eventually, the country had to do something almost unthinkable for a sovereign nation: give up on its own money entirely. In early 2009, Zimbabwe officially abandoned the Zimbabwean dollar. Instead, the country adopted a multi-currency system, letting people transact in US dollars, South African rand, and other foreign currencies. It worked almost instantly. Hyperinflation stopped in its tracks because Zimbabwe was now using currencies it couldn't simply print more of. But the story doesn't end there. In the years that followed, Zimbabwe tried reintroducing a local currency more than once and repeatedly ran into the same trust problem. a population that had lived through total monetary collapse, simply didn't believe in Zimbabwean money. So in 2024, the country tried something different, a new currency called the ZiG, short for Zimbabwe gold, backed not just by promises, but by actual gold and foreign currency reserves held by the central bank. The idea is simple. This time, money is supposed to be worth something the government can't just print into existence. And that's the real lesson buried underneath the trillion-dollar banknotes and the wheelbarrows of cash. Currency isn't valuable because a government declares it so. It's valuable because people trust it'll still buy something tomorrow. Zimbabwe learned that the hardest way possible, and the world is still watching to see if it's finally learned the lesson for